and welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. Birth stories, birth education, and the pursuit of surrendering it all to God. Let's get started. How would you feel if you were planning a birth center birth for your second child after already having had a natural birth there for your first, and suddenly you were forced to go to the hospital during active labor during the height of the COVID insanity, and it had nothing to do with you or your baby and everything to do with the state of the birth center itself? Talk about having to surrender your plans to the Lord. Join us today as Louisa shares her 3 birth stories and the remarkable similarities and differences between them. Well, welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am super excited about my guest today as she is one of the godmothers of my children. So, Louisa, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are, your family, your life, etc.
Thanks, Kayla. Yes, I have known Kayla for a long time now. My name is Louisa Brown. I am a counselor and a worship leader. I lead worship with Kayla's husband, Chris. We got married the same year. She started having children before me. But I have 3 beautiful children, Eli, Josie, and Aaron. I am 4 months postpartum with Aaron. And my husband, Zach, and I have been married for 12 years. We live in Reidsville, North Carolina. And I actually had 3 natural births. All 3 of mine were natural births. It's one of the things I love about life in general. I love everything about birth and natural birth and the experience of birth and all that stuff. And now I don't love pregnancy, but I do love birth. But yeah, I'm a counselor, and like I said before, I also lead worship. I attend Definition Church with Chris and Kayla. We've been at church there for almost 15 years. We have sons the same age too. And like Kayla said, I am a godmother to her many children that I love.
And we are grateful. Okay, so let's get started talking about your very first pregnancy and how that went, how you found out. Was it planned? Was it not planned? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah. So Zach and I had been married for almost 5 years when we decided to start trying for our first baby. And fortunately for me and my personality, all 3 of our children were planned and kind of prepared for. So I had been on birth control in the beginning of our marriage, got off maybe after about 3 years of being married. And then we found out we were pregnant it was like 2 weeks after our 5th anniversary. So, and we got pregnant on our first try. The Lord was very gracious to us in that way. Yeah. So we found out we were pregnant and we were super excited. We lived in Greensboro at the time. And then not long after we got pregnant, we started kind of looking to move a little closer to my parents in the Reidsville area. We were living in Greensboro at the time because we knew we wanted to be a little bit closer to our support system. Zach's parents live in Eden, so that was going to be a little closer for us. And Zach had just started working for my family's business. We own a funeral home in the Reidsville area, so he had started working there. So that schedule is kind of crazy, and so I knew we needed to be a little bit closer to him as well, just to have access with starting a family and the way that schedule works and everything. So that was how we found out.
Okay, so how did you go about seeking care for that pregnancy? You said you had all natural births, and that's something you really like. So where did that stem from? Was that something you were raised with, or something you discovered later in life, or where did that come from?
Yeah, so I had the fortunate opportunity of being raised by a relatively crunchy mom. My mom had natural births, and she breastfed, and we were homeschooled growing up. So all of those things, I felt like I knew I would always do, if that makes sense. Like, just the way that it was talked about in my childhood, and I experienced it. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. So for me, some of that I think maybe was just osmosis, but I always knew that I would have natural birth, that I would breastfeed. And I had exposure to it obviously because I was the oldest child, but yeah, so I always knew that that's what I would do. If as long as I was able to. So my husband's mom actually had very different experiences. Zach was raised in kind of a total opposite experience. Now, she actually had natural births, but she had hospital births. My mom had all three of us in a birth center. And so I was actually kind of leaning more towards like home birth option, but Zach was really hesitant and nervous about that. So we compromised and went the birth center route. And so we decided to have our first baby at the Chapel Hill Birth Center. They had been established for a long time. My mom had us at the High Point Birth Center when it was open. So we reached out to them pretty early on after we had found out that we were pregnant and established care there. And so for Josie and for Eli, we had selected the care of the Chapel Hill Birth Center.
And how did your pregnancy go? Like, was it a smooth one? Were there any hiccups, any complications?
Well, so my births were, I would consider them to be pretty like textbook as far as they were healthy, beautiful pregnancies. I mean, I didn't have any complications or like no issues as far as like from a health standpoint. I just don't love being pregnant. Uh, and I am sick with all of my pregnancies. I have been sick. Eli, I was sick for the first 16 weeks. And, where most people that do have sickness kind of hit that 12-week mark and start turning a corner. Oh, I hit 12 weeks and thought, well, I thought this was supposed to get better. Yeah, I threw up most days with Eli for probably about 16 weeks. And then about 16 weeks, I'd start having a good day. And then I'd have to go backwards, and have a bad day. And then I'd have a couple good days. But I felt like I started rounding out and turning a corner around 16 weeks. I remember at 16 weeks having like my first day where I didn't feel terrible. And then with Josie, her pregnancy symptoms were actually much worse than Eli. And I guess I attribute that to her just being a girl. I don't know. But I threw up multiple times a day for 25 weeks. And I also had terrible vertigo and pretty chronic headaches with her until I got out of first trimester, which was very debilitating with a toddler. It was really awful. Honestly, the fact that I chose to do it again, after that was pretty remarkable because it was really difficult with her. And then with Aaron, very similar to Eli, I would say I stopped being nauseous with him pretty completely around 20 or 22 weeks, but I did much, much less throwing up actually. So, as I did a decent amount of throwing up with all of them. Aaron was the least. Eli was the second least, and Josie was the most. By far.
Okay, so other than all of the throwing up
Yeah.
and nausea and all the grossness, which I agree, that's the worst part of the whole thing for me. Totally agree with you. Other than that, it went smoothly. So then,
For the most part, I did have sciatic pain with Eli and Josie that started at 10 weeks and did not leave until delivery with both of them. It was so bizarre. It was on my right side. And it was anytime I'd lift my leg, go up the steps, or go to sit down on the toilet. Those were the times where that pain was the most significant. Super strange. And then the first time I went to use the bathroom after delivery, post delivery, so like less than an hour after post delivery, when I went to go use the bathroom, prepared for that pain, and it was completely gone. And then I didn't have it with Aaron. It was such a gift. I kept kind of expecting it to come on, and then I never had it. So that also was a little bit of, kind of annoying in that just throughout those two pregnancies. But I did not have it with him, which was wonderful. But I did have it with the other two.
but you managed to run though, didn't you?
With Eli, I ran for 37 weeks. I ran about probably 4 or 5 days a week for 37 weeks. And then with Josie at 30 weeks, about the time I stopped throwing up, I had a really bad hip injury. I had started running again with her probably about maybe 15 weeks. And then at 30 weeks, I got a hip injury. And the chiropractor told me that if it was hurting me while I was running, that I should stop running until it wasn't hurting me anymore. And it never did heal really until after delivery. It just, it's just pressure on those ligaments in my groin and hip flexor. And it just never really got right until after delivery. So anyway, so I had to stop running with her around 30 weeks. And then with Aaron, I really mainly just walked with him because I was pushing the stroller. So I didn't do
Right.
as much running with him, but I was able to run with both of them until I injured myself with Josie. So yeah, that was unfortunate.
Well, injuries come much easier to pregnant women, so it's maybe to be expected as well.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, so you get to the end of Eli's pregnancy, and how far along are you? How does labor begin? What happened?
Yeah. So we I was 39 weeks and 3 days, and we were closing on our house that morning, which funny enough, we sold our first house to some good friends from church. It had been kind of a long process, and our friends were like really anxious that we weren't going to be able to get it done before I went into labor. And I was like really prepared to go late with Eli because my mom with me was 12 days late. So I was just expecting to go late with my first baby. Like mentally, I was just totally there, prepared to go late. And so that morning we went and signed papers to finalize our house. I got to work and went to the bathroom and lost my mucus plug. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. So then I like went into my office and closed the door. I wasn't seeing clients anymore at that point because I had decided to see my last client about 2 weeks before delivery, just in case, something happened. So I went into my office, closed the door, and did all my continuing ed for like the rest of the year because I was like, I don't know if this is it, if it's not it. I want to get this stuff done. So I started working on my continuing ed. I'm a counselor, by the way, and I came out at like lunchtime to use the bathroom again and had like bloody show. So I knew that probably more than likely, since it was happening in sequence like that, I was probably moving in that direction. Whether or not it was going to be today or tomorrow, who knew, but it was like enough that I was like, I don't know about this. I still didn't call Zach because my sweet husband he's a little uptight when it comes to those things. And I just didn't want him to get like worried or upset or be like, you need to come home right now. So I didn't let him know until he got home after work. And so he was like, well, we may not be able to go to Grilled Cheese Club, which, if you don't know, my family and we always meet at this little place in Reedsville called Mayberry on Thursdays at lunch. And we call ourselves the Grilled Cheese Club. And so this was on a Wednesday. And so Zach was like, we're going to miss Grilled Cheese Club. So we need to go tonight. So we went to Mayberry to eat dinner. We're in there and I was wearing sweatpants and Zach went to go pay the bill. And my brother-in-law's grandparents were in there. And so he went over to talk to them. And I stood up to get my pocketbook and my water just started going all down my legs. And I was like, this is definitely my water breaking. Cause that sensation of like not being able to control it. I was like, this is not pee. Like this is my water. Cause it was like just running down my legs into my shoes. Luckily I was wearing tennis shoes. So it wasn't like I was in sandals or something, but so I just excused myself with my pocketbook on my shoulder, went right out the door, didn't stop to speak to my brother-in-law's grandparents. And I'm like waiting in the car. I got like one of those recyclable trash bags and set it in the seat of the passenger seat of my car. Zach finally comes out and he's like, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you speak to Zach's grandparents? And I was like, well, my water just broke. And he's like, what? Your water? And I was like, yeah, I think I need to go home. And he's like, well, you need to call your doula and you need to call the midwife. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do that, but I'm not having any contractions. And I need to go home because I've got to change clothes. So, so I did call my doula at the time. And she was like, yeah, well, if your contractions haven't started, try to go home and rest. See if, probably your contractions will start within the next 2 to 24 hours or whatever. So luckily, because I was at a birth center, they didn't put any type of pressure on me to come in right away, from after my water broke, which was super nice. So I was able to go home and just change clothes, lay down. And I actually laid down until about 11:30 p.m. When my contractions started yeah, they probably started around 11, and around like 11:30 or 12. I couldn't ignore them anymore. Like I couldn't just continue to lay in the bed. They were significant enough that like I was kind of having to stand up on the side of the bed during a contraction, and then I'd kind of lay back down in between, and they were like, disorganized in 12 to 8 minutes apart, somewhere in that kind of range. And then at like a little after midnight, I told Zach, I was like, let's get up and like maybe watch a movie and see how it goes at that point. So we were watching a movie. I think we were watching one of the Marvel movies. I was like in and out of sleep in between contractions. He watched the movie, and then I I think it was maybe around 2 o'clock. I told him, I was like, I think we should head towards Chapel Hill, and he was like, okay. So we packed up, let my mom know because she was going to keep the dogs. Um, so we got to the birth center. It was probably about 2:30. I want to say maybe 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. when we got there with Eli. And I immediately asked to get in the tub. And so they asked if I wanted to be checked. And I think at that point, just like with being a first time person in labor, like I had done tons of reading, I had done tons of preparation. We'd taken a 10-week birth class together. I felt very well prepared. So I think in my mind, I just needed to know so I kind of could prepare myself for what I was in for. Like if we got there and I was at a 4, I was like, well, I might be in labor for 24 hours, or if I'm at like a 6 or a 7, then okay, well, I'm as far along as I was hoping to be or whatever. So I was almost 6 centimeters and I was like 80% effaced when we got there. So I at least felt better that I wasn't like a 2 or something. And I did get kind of nauseous in the car because it's about an hour car ride to the birth center from my house. But I didn't actually throw up. I just used my essential oils, all my snake oils, trying to like keep myself from being sick in the car. And I got in the tub when we got there, and I spent I'd say about an hour and a half in the tub, maybe 2 hours. I was in the water for a long time because it just helped me not experience the contractions so intensely. And because my water had broken, found this out with Josie because my water didn't break with her. My contractions were definitely a little more painful and more intense with him than they were with her because I didn't have that cushion of my water. And I remember it's probably about close to 6 o'clock in the morning. I was like kind of getting tired of being in the tub and being in labor. And I like looked up at Zach and I was like, I'm ready to go home. And he was like, sorry, dear, but you're in for it. We're not going home. And then kind of come to find out, like I was in transition at that point, which is, that's what everybody says. It's like at the point of transition, you're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. So after I said that, the midwife was like, let's get you out and kind of check you. And so I was 9.5 and had like this lip of cervix left, which is so annoying. She's like, I think if I move your lip of cervix, it won't be any time before you can start pushing. And so I said, okay, whatever. Hindsight, I've learned a little bit about that since then and maybe wouldn't have gone that route. But anyways, we did that. And then I started pushing. And I pushed 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 for 4.5 hours with Eli. And it went on forever. I mean, every position you could think of on the birthing stool, squatting with the bar on my side, on my back, literally every position they could get me in to try to get this little booger to come on down. And it just was not happening. They used the mirror, and a couple of times in the mirror, I just got so discouraged because I would push and I would see him like bloom forward. And then when I would stop pushing, literally like it would close completely back up. And I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? What is happening? And not to sound like prideful or anything. Maybe this was the Lord teaching me something through all this. But I just thought, oh, by the time I get to pushing, I'm going to be a rock star. Like, I'm like a pretty disciplined person. Like, I ran my entire pregnancy. I'm not like scared of pain. And I don't know. I really anticipated by the time I got to pushing that it would just be, that would be it. And it was not. So at about 3.5 hours into pushing, my midwife was going off because it was transitioned into morning. It was like 8 o'clock or 8:30. And she came in and she was like, it's shift change and I'm tired. And I really think that you'll be better served with a fresh midwife. And she was kind of posing it as like a question to me, like if I would really like for her to stay or if it would be okay for her to go. And I told her, I said, I just was like really discouraged, obviously, because I'd been pushing for 3+ hours at that point. And my contractions had already also spaced to about like 7 minutes apart. They were like really wide apart because my uterus was really tired. So we switched midwives, and the new midwife, it like the Lord just knew what I needed. Like she was very fresh and very calm. She didn't have much to say at all. Like she just kind of sat there with me and did perineal massage the entire time. Every time in a contraction and I would push, she was like, massaging me, and she kept saying, "You're just opening up. Just trust your body. He's coming down slowly. You're opening up. You're getting ready to meet your baby." She's just like, oh my gosh. And so then I started making some progress. They pulled the mirror back out. And then she really started kind of like coaching me, in that time. And they were like giving me Gatorade through a straw. And they were like all, praying over me. And I had music. My playlist had probably played through about 4 times at this point. And I saw in the mirror, like in some of my pushing, that like he was staying right there. And so I was like feeling like, oh, thank God, maybe this is almost over. And then he came. I do remember in that time being aware of the fact that it was daylight outside and that I was thinking, oh my gosh, our parents are outside the door. They had gotten there at some point between like 6:30 a.m. and 11, and I was thinking, it's getting close to lunch. They're going to be really hungry. I need to get this baby out. And so finally at like 11:25 or something like that, little Eli made his debut into the world. And I think my midwife really thinks that he had a fist up at his mouth. And so it was like he was having a really hard time coming through the birth canal because his hand was like up at his face that whole time. So once it kind of got down in position, he came right out. And fortunately I did not tear. I didn't rip. I didn't have anything. I had like what they call a tiny skid mark. So it didn't even require a stitch or anything like that, which was so fortunate for a first baby. So yeah, then he came out and he was a little 7 pound, 7 pound 3 ounces, 7 pound 3 ounces. And cute as he could be, he was screaming the minute he came out. And he did a lot of screaming in his first year of life. So, but yeah, it was a wonderful experience. My midwives were wonderful. Zach was wonderful. If at the time I would have, even though it was challenging and I pushed for a really long time, it was the birth that I had prayed for. I had no complications. I did not have any concerns or issues. My midwives, kept checking Eli's heart rate the whole time I was pushing and just kept saying his heart rate's strong. Everything's good. We're just going to keep on. And fortunately, I was able to have him naturally in the environment that I wanted to. And, he latched beautifully. I didn't have any issues with that either, which was such a gift. And so I would have rated that birth probably a 10 out of 10 I didn't have anything to compare it to, obviously, at the time, but it was amazing. And I felt like it was very spiritual. I felt like the Lord was there and the presence was there. And I felt like, he helped me finish the job. I was very, very tired at the end. And looking back, I feel like I have some lapses in memory with some of that stuff, but I was just so exhausted and kind of out of it, for like the next 24 hours or so. But yeah, so that was kind of how his birth went, ended, progressed or whatever.
Well, that sounds awesome, especially for a first birth. That's not even really that long. Like, it's a very short.
I was really probably only in labor for about 8 hours.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was great.
And then how was postpartum with him?
So postpartum, so it honestly, I felt super elated. Like we were so happy to start our family and he was so cute. he was not a good sleeper. I mean, those first few days and weeks, newborns sleep a lot, and he was relatively like I would say, a traditional newborn. He slept on and off. And I actually had decided that I was going to co-sleep with my babies long before I had them. Kind of in the process of like doing all my research and reading in pregnancy. I'd never thought that I wouldn't, just because I knew I was planning to nurse and breastfeed. And everything I had read had kind of pointed to just most success being that decision. Also, I just was of the mindset of, in every third world country, they don't have beautiful, perfect nurseries. They sleep with their babies and somehow they stay alive. So, that was the approach that I was planning to take always. So I think that that saved me a little bit in the first little bit, not having to get up so much. And Zach did all of like the diaper changes and all that stuff in the beginning with him too, which helped at nighttime. And fortunately too, because I didn't tear, I really didn't feel like I had a very big long recovery either. My milk came in about 30 hours. Luckily with the birth center too, they come to you at that 1 day postpartum, so you don't have to go to the doctor, which was also really nice, just to check to make sure they're gaining weight. He didn't lose any weight between leaving the birth center and the midwife coming to the house, which was also just very encouraging for a first baby. And I was super fortunate. I just had great success with breastfeeding. I did not have really any complications with that. Didn't have any cracks or blisters or anything. So I was just really fortunate. I felt I was like made to do it in a lot of ways. Like it was like a fulfillment of a lot of what I was supposed to be doing. So that was like just such a gift also, with just being a first time mom and trying to figure things out. And luckily too, I had lots of friends who had babies at this point. I was like kind of on the back end of my friends having children. So I'd been around a lot of babies. I'd been around a lot of breastfeeding. So I think that absolutely played to my advantage as well.
Okay, so you already said that all of your pregnancies were planned. So how how long in between when Eli was born and when y'all decided to try for Josie?
So Eli was a very, we'll just say, challenging newborn toddler. He just, he was needy. He did not sleep. He did not sleep through the night until he was almost 22 months old. We nursed until he was 27 months, and he didn't take a passy. So I just really, I knew that I wanted more children, but I just could not even fathom being pregnant or like having someone else to take care of, with just how demanding he was. So it really wasn't until I probably got a month's worth of sleep before I decided we were going to start trying for another child. And ironically enough, he stopped nursing at like 27 months, and we started that very next month trying to get pregnant. And I actually had a chemical pregnancy. So we got pregnant right away. And so I had a positive pregnancy test, and it was probably like 31 days. My cycle had been like 31 days. And then I wasn't feeling sick or anything. So like around day 35, I took another test and it was negative. And then that day I started my period. So, and it was, it was an unusual period. I had like some clotting and severe pain in my back. And typically for me with my cycle, I do not. I don't even know I'm going to start my period till it starts, and I don't have much pain at all. So that happened let's see, that was in May. And then we waited a month, didn't try in June, and then started to try again in July. Did not get pregnant in July. And then in August, we tried again and got pregnant in August. So really, it was only like a 3-month period. But that was also just a kind of it's interesting. I know people that go through infertility. I have many friends that have gone through infertility. And even just that short blip of time, it's so strange how that experience kind of like plays with your mind and makes you feel like, is there something wrong with me? Am I doing something different this time that I didn't do last time? Like you go back to this like need for control, right? Where I'm like, what can I do to make this work? Like I know what to do, So it was just a time where I just like really had to surrender to the Lord. Like, Lord, I know when we'll get pregnant with our next child. I know that you have already picked who they are for our family. and just trusting that process. And of course, the month that we got pregnant, we were actually kind of trying to not get pregnant because I do hair and makeup for weddings and it was going to put me having a May baby. And I had already like 5 weddings booked for like May and early June of 2020. And so, of course, when that next cycle came around in September and I was pregnant, I was like, well, I got a bunch of people to call and cancel. So, and the funny thing was my sister had just found out she was pregnant too. So we were pregnant within a month of each other at the same time. She was pregnant with her first and I was pregnant with my second. So that was also just extremely special.
So you mentioned 2020.
Mm.
So let's see. So you got pregnant in August of 2019, planning to deliver again at the Chapel Hill Birth Center. And how did the end of your pregnancy go there, with it being the spring of 2020?
Mm-mm-mm. Well, so it was traumatic. There's no real good way to put it other than that. So my baby shower was planned for
April.
March. April? Was it April?
Hmm. I was planning it with
Yes.
Ashley. So yeah, we already sent out invitations.
Invitations and everything. And then, and my friend Ashley, who was doing the baby shower with you, she's a nurse. And so she's in healthcare. And so she was saying, well, maybe what we should do is just, with this COVID thing, we just don't know a lot about it. Like, I think we're going to have to cancel it. And I was like, gosh, that's just so disappointing. And she was like, yeah, well, maybe we can plan like a sip and see for like June, after she gets here in May. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Well, little did we know that like the entire world was shutting down for months, until Christmas. We weren't even going to have Christmas services. We weren't even going to be going to church. Like, we just had no concept of like what this was actually going to entail. Schools were going to be out. And the prospect of that at the time just seemed so wild, like not even a consideration. So obviously, like, COVID happens. The other thing that was kind of interesting, so in my second pregnancy, I didn't have to go to the birth center quite as much for care because I was a second pregnancy. I didn't have any complications. Care was already established. So I only went to the birth center 5 times the entire pregnancy with Josie, because between being, not having to go much in the first trimester and then, requesting to have them more spaced out and then having like virtual because of COVID, I literally only saw a midwife like 5 times in the entire pregnancy. So that was kind of nice because it's a kind of a hike to get over there. But yeah, so obviously we had like all of these questions about COVID, all this craziness, and just not knowing with like the effects on children at that time, and then like the whole push of the vaccine and like all of these crazy things that were happening. So I was just so glad that we were not going the hospital route, just because, people were being hospitalized and they were being intubated, and we just didn't know like what to expect. And lo and behold, come time to deliver my sweet little Josie, and I went into labor the day before my due date. She was due on the 22nd, and I went into labor the night going into the 21st. And I'd had prodronal labor with her like for a couple days leading up. So I'd like at night I would have like several hours of contractions thinking this is it. And then it would just stop, which that really played with my mind too. Like, and also my headspace was just, I was like really uptight about all of this COVID stuff. Like, I wasn't scared of COVID, but just, a lot of people in my life were really anxious. Amelia had Anna Lewis the month before in the hospital. Nobody was able to go. Her postpartum was just a little challenging. And so I think I was just like not in a great space because of all of that. And so the night I went into labor, it was a torrential monsoon, and it was about 12 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock. So really the timing is almost identical to Eli with Josie. Went into labor like around 11. Around 1 or 2 o'clock, we're trying to decide what we're going to do, if it's time to go or not. So Zach calls the midwife, and the line is dead. There's no call. We're not getting the birth center. It's like a deadline. So he is freaking out, and I'm in labor. Like, I'm probably having contractions like 5 minutes apart at this point. And we had called my parents because my mom was planning to go with us to the birth center. And Zach finally gets in touch with the midwife via Facebook that's on call. The midwife that's on call, he got in touch with her on Facebook. She's like, I'm so sorry. Our lines are down at the birth center. We've been hit by lightning. We have no power. Here's my cell phone number. Give me a call. So Zach calls the midwife cell phone. She's like, I'm so sorry, but there's like a 2-mile radius around the birth center that does not have power. She was like, how far along is she? You know, obviously it was a second baby. They didn't want me to wait a super long time, just, you know, not knowing like how I would progress. She was like apologizing all over herself. She's like, really, our only option is for you to come to the hospital. And I tell you, I mean, I was devastated. I mean, I'm already in labor. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. And I remember like my dad and Zach and my mom and like us just like stopping and praying. And I remember like having like a audible conversation with the Lord, like, if this is what you have for me, if this is what we need to do, I will do it. I'm just going to surrender my desire, my will to you. But I am really mad, just like so grossly disappointed. And also just with COVID. And that meant my mom could not go because you could only have one support person. It was just a nightmare. And so we're driving to Chapel Hill. My parents stayed at home with my son because he obviously wouldn't be able to come either. And it was like raining sideways on the road to Chapel Hill. We're like, Zach is praying out loud. And we pull up to the hospital and the midwife meets me outside. And she like takes one look at me and she's like, we're not doing triage. We're going straight up. And then when we got into my room, I was 8.5 centimeters dilated. So I was already very well progressed at that point. And of course, we were all in masks and I had to stay in a mask until my COVID test came back negative. And it was because it was so early in COVID, because she was born in May when the world shut down in March. I had to do the MRSA test for COVID. It was the one where they put it way up your nose and twisted it, and they had to leave it up there for they had to twist it like 9 times and leave it up there for 30 seconds or something like that. So my nose bled for the entire time for about an hour after she did the test, and I had to wear a mask. So blood is like pouring into my mask. They would switch the mask out. It would like get a certain amount of blood in it. They would switch the mask out. And I was like, that was my worst part of labor and delivery with Josie, because it was just like so uncomfortable. My eyes are like pouring water. I'm like crying hysterically. I cannot stop it because of how bad the test was. Zach had to wait to come in until his test came back negative. The midwife, she was as sweet as she could be. She apologized all over herself. She had to I asked to get in the tub, but at the hospital, the tub has to go through all of these like sterilization processes before you can get in it. So they had to like run a whole bath and sterilize it. Then they had to run water again. So it took about 30 minutes before I could actually get in the tub. And then I was only in there for about 35 minutes when the midwife came in there and she was like, you seem a little pushy to me. Can I check you? And I was like, sure. So I get out and I was 9.5 again with this lip of cervix, and my water hadn't broken. And so, even at the end, that was God's mercy in that birth, honestly, because even though it was completely chaotic and very stressful, I would have rated my 10, even my 10. I would have rated my pain at the end out of 10 at like maybe a 7. Like, even though I was like very much in transition, my pain was just not that high. So I kept thinking, this cannot be it, because it just wasn't that intense. And she said, would you like for me to break your water? I think that will finish it. And I said, well, I guess so. So she broke my water and tried to move that lip of cervix. And we waited probably a few more contractions after that. And she was like, okay, I think it's time for you to start pushing. And I still pushed with Josie for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It was somewhere between 2.5 hours. And honestly, I felt like I had some PTSD from Eli, because I told her when I started pushing, I was like, I'm really bad at pushing and I'm just not going to be able to get this baby out. It's just not going to work. And she's like, just calm down. You're not bad at pushing. It won't last as long as it did with Eli, I promise. But I felt like I pushed for a long time before I felt like I got it in rhythm, but I really looking back on it, feel like a lot of it was anxiety and just like adrenaline, probably like keeping me really, constricted. And then also being in the hospital, like all the factors just played against me with her. Whereas probably if it had been more comfortable, that would not have happened. But yeah, so after about 2 hours of pushing, Josie was born. So I actually ended up delivering both Josie and Eli on my back because I had pushed for so long and, just didn't feel like I could get good momentum. And really any standing up position just hurt so bad. It caused me so much pain. I just couldn't tolerate it. So I ended up on my back. And she was born and she weighed 7 pounds, 7 ounces. And again, fortunately, I did not tear or have any type of issue with that. So that was a wonderful gift. And the other really nice thing was that the Chapel Hill Hospital works with the birth center often. And so they honored birth center policy, and we did only have to stay at the hospital for 6 hours post delivery, which was such a gift. So we did come on home, but we had to go back to Chapel Hill, 24 hours later for like a weight check and everything because they had stopped doing home visits because of COVID. When we left the hospital on the way home, Josie aspirated in the car seat. She like went to spit up and she had just this like copious amounts of mucus and she was choking. And I actually almost thought that I would sit in the front seat going home because like first time mom, you like sit back there in the car with the car seat and you're like everything, you're terrified of everything. And then I was like, oh, she's a second baby, she's fine. I think I'll ride in the front. And then at the very last minute, I was like, no, I'm gonna ride in the back with her too. And I'm so thankful I did because I jerked her out of the car seat. She was not breathing. I jerked her out of the car seat, flipped her over on her back, it was like beating her on the back. And I just happened to have a bulb syringe, suction syringe thing in my
Mm-hmm.
diaper bag. So I pulled it out and I suctioned her out. And then she started breathing again and she was choking up. But anytime we laid her on her back for like that first 48 hours, she was having trouble. So at the 24-hour visit, the midwife, the nurse actually saw her do that spitting up where she was just spitting up pretty much her entire feed. So she was down 9%. My milk could not come in completely. But again, I totally attribute this to stress and just the trauma of the experience and where we ended up. And she really wanted me to take her back to the hospital to have her checked for a blockage or a sphincter issue or bacteria in her blood, all these terrifying things. So right back to Chapel Hill Hospital we went, not even 24 hours later. And again, Zach could not go in because she could only have one visitor because of COVID. So she was admitted and I went with her. And within an hour of being there, they ran all the tests. She did an ultrasound, she had a x-ray, and they did a blood panel and everything came back clear. Praise the Lord. But because we were admitted, we had to stay for 24-hour observation, which I just was not prepared for that. I mean, I was literally 24 hours postpartum. I didn't bring a pad, a change of clothes. I didn't have contact solution. I literally was like, I didn't have more, breast pads. It was a nightmare. So here we are in the hospital and we're in the children's unit because she's been discharged. So we're not like in labor delivery anymore. So they were like totally unprepared for me. And the pediatrician came back to like talk through all the stuff. And she was like, everything's good. I think we're just going to, because you're admitted, you need to stay for 24-hour observation. And I was like, you're kidding me. And she was like, no, that's really what we recommend because we just want to make sure that this passes. And she was like, can I get you anything? And I was like, well, yeah, I kind of need some pads. And she was like, she kind of looked at me sideways, like, for what? And I was like, because I'm bleeding, because I literally just pushed this. It's not like I was here for 3 days and got discharged. I'm like 20 hours postpartum. My milk's not even in yet. So she was like, oh yeah, I'll call labor and delivery, see if we can get some things sent up. So anyway, so Zach's waiting in the parking lot to hear the information because he doesn't know what's going on. So I call him, and I'm like, he's like, well, I'm just going to get a hotel. I was like, no, you're going to go home with our son who's 3 years old. You're going to make life as normal as possible. And so anyways, we had to stay. And over that 24-hour period, I watched her like cough up all of what I believe I attribute it to just being like amniotic fluid that she had swallowed. And it was just, she had a lot of mucus and just causing her to not be able to. I also had a lot of colostrum. My letdown is very fast. I just think it was more than she could take in. And so then I watched it really change. My milk also came in when I was in the hospital over that 24 hours. So her weight, they told me as long as her weight came up or was the same the next morning and she wasn't losing weight again, that we could leave in the morning. So she had stayed the same. She hadn't lost any weight. So my parents came and picked us up and took us home. So even my postpartum was kind of off to a pretty rocky start with her. And honestly, after that experience with her, after I kind of came out of the fog, like a few months later, I remember feeling like I was robbed, like just I felt like my experience was robbed. Even though my labor and delivery was beautiful and fine. Like I didn't have any complications, no problems. And fortunately, she was fine. I just felt like the whole experience was just so tainted that then I could not share her with anybody. People who brought us food dropped it off on the doorstep. We didn't let anybody come in and hold her. Like it was just so sad to me. And she was also a much easier, sweeter baby. She just was like cuddly and a great daytime sleeper. And she took a passy. And so like she would smile at everything. Eli didn't smile until he was probably 6 or 7 months old. He didn't laugh for the first time until he was 14 months old. Like he was just so serious. And she was jovial and easygoing. And I just felt so robbed. Like we couldn't share her with people. We weren't even going to church. Like it was just so sad. So, anyways, that is the, the short of it as far as the experience with her with 2020. So honestly, I felt like what happened to me in 2020 is what motivated me to feel the desire to have a third child, honestly, in a lot of ways, because I've just felt like that cannot be it. I just don't feel like I can end on that note, even though she was wonderful and I was so thankful to have her. Like, and as months and years rolled past, I, moved past it and worked through it, but I still just felt shorted in a lot of ways.
I would have too. I mean, absolutely, I would have. So, okay, so we're going to have this redemptive third birth and redemptive third birth experience. So, how did you do things differently that time around, considering what happened the second time?
Yeah. So it is just, the Lord is so merciful in how he does things because, originally I had wanted to have home birth and Zach just was not open to it. And I conceded I would have never been comfortable with like going a traditional OBGYN route and hospital birth. But luckily we had a birth center option and it worked fine other than just what happened in 2020. But because of what happened in 2020 and just the nature of that whole experience, I told Zach before we chose to start trying for a third, I said I would like to have a third baby. And if we choose to have a third baby, I would really like to have a home birth. You know that I can do this. I've had 2 seamless labor and deliveries, no complications. I'm a perfect candidate for a home birth. And, he prayed about it and everything. And he softened and said, if you really want to do this, I will be okay with it. So, and I had the privilege of being at your home birth not many months before too, which I think also helped him as well, just like be a little more open to it and to the idea. So we knew a midwife who delivered and did home births, and I had obviously seen her in action with you, and so that was also a lot more, I think, comforting for him and made him feel a little bit more settled on it. And then also just the sweetest thing about it was uh we met with Courtney, and not only did we meet with her, but she was from the Louisville Clemens area. And so, she drove for your birth, but she was in the process of moving to Rockingham County when I was pregnant with my third baby, which meant she was going to be less than 10 minutes away from me. So it was just ordained. It was the way it was supposed to be. So we decided in January of 2022 that we were going to start trying for a third baby. And then we got pregnant on our first try again with Aaron in let's see, so the end of May, we started trying. And by our anniversary, we found out on the day of our 11th anniversary that we were pregnant with him. And so we were super excited, and Josie and Eli were thrilled. And it was so cute because I'm pretty sick in the beginnings of my pregnancies. And I was trying to decide like how long we were going to wait to tell the kids. And it had been about maybe like 2 weeks. And so I was probably coming up on like 7 weeks pregnant. And Eli said to me, which he's my very serious, very detailed, observant child. And he said, Mom, why have you not been feeling well? Because it had been, I've been saying for about a week that I was just not feeling well. I was tired, just wasn't feeling well. And he said, Mom, why are you not feeling well? Just like point blank. And I said, well, buddy, we're going to have a baby. And he said, oh, that's wonderful. Just as serious as he could be. And I said, it is wonderful. And he said, I really hope it's a boy. And I said, well, that would be great. I think that we would do really well with another boy in our family, but it could be a girl. And he said, yeah. And funny enough, when we got pregnant with Josie, he had told me adamantly that he wanted a sister. He had asked God for a sister and that he had said yes. And when we found out she was a girl, there you go, lo and behold, she was a girl. So it's just funny because he has pretty much determined the gender each time since then. So it was just really cute. So then we actually did like one of those at-home blood tests with Aaron. We sent it off. And when we got it back, I let him open the email, and he opened it and he was super cute. He said, it's a boy. And so it was just like so sweet and fun. So we found out what he was maybe around like 11 or 12 weeks, right as we were ending the first trimester, which was just like a real sweet experience for them. So yeah, we decided to do that. We connected with Courtney, met with her, interviewed her, decided that we were going to go that route, and just clicked. We just clicked so well. And so I was sick for, like I said, that first, 16 to 20 weeks with him as well. But I did the least amount of throwing up. And honestly, his pregnancy was my best pregnancy of the three, which again is just God's mercy and redemption after having a really hard time with Josie too. I mean, and some of it I think was probably, I have these two children. I have to keep going. They're, I can't just like, lay around like, like I'm dying. But also I do feel like I just had like probably the best energy. I did the least amount of throwing up. I also had experience. So I knew like how to help myself, like just kind of like being a little more proactive with like first thing. And I get up, eating something very heavy and high in protein, being intentional to make sure that I'm like getting enough rest and things like that. So I do think that helped probably a little bit as well.
I do too. So, okay. So now we're in the year? We're in 2023.
Well, going into, yes. So I was pregnant from June of 2022 till March of 23.
Okay. So you had your first baby at 39 and 3, 4, 3, something like that. And your second right at 40 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when the 40-week date approaches with the third, what happened?
Oh, so Aaron was actually due on Eli's birthday. So we literally got pregnant at the same time and had the same anticipated due date. Well, a little earlier than Eli's due date because Eli was actually due on the 4th and he was born on the 1st. So his due date was the 1st. And so I just knew that this baby was going to come in February because, in fact, I was even thinking like maybe around my birthday, which is February 17th. And, I told Courtney, I was like, I would just, I'm just really anticipating this baby will come, but, before March 1st, because I really did not want them to share a birthday. And now Eli thought that was going to be the cat's meow. And he really wanted him to be born on his birthday. But I said, buddy, you just don't know, like, in the long term, it's probably not ideal because my dad and my aunt share a birthday 2 years apart. They have the same birthday 2 years apart. And actually, they had a brother too so their birthday is August 19th, and then they had a brother whose birthday was August 21st. So 3 babies in 6 years, 2, 4, 6, yeah, and all had August birthdays. And my grandfather used to say it was those cold November nights. clearly, it happens at the same time every time. But so my birthday hits. I wrap up my clients because I'm in private practice. And Eli was determined he was going to finish kindergarten because we homeschool before this baby came. So we kind of wrapped that up early February. He finished all of his stuff. And then we just waited and we waited and we waited. And then March 1st came. Every day that got close to it, he was like, he's going to be born on my birthday. I told you. And I was like, maybe. Well, then the first came and went. And then I was like, well, any day now. And then we approached 41 weeks and it came and went. And I was like, what the heck is going on? The other weird thing was I had not a single contraction, nothing. I mean, it was like, I had tons of movement and he was, very active, but I didn't have lightning crotch, which I had terribly with Josie with that sciatic pain. I didn't have any of that. I didn't have lightning crotch. I didn't have sciatic pain. I honestly was not even like what I would consider to be like grossly uncomfortable at the end. I kept telling Courtney, like, I don't feel 41 weeks. Like, I'm not like at that degree of discomfort. I'm fine, which I do think that helped mentally because I wasn't like totally miserable or anything. So at 41 weeks, my husband started getting a little anxious. Like, what's the plan? What's the plan? And I'm like, well, the plan is to wait for this baby to put me in labor. I don't know what other things. We're not going to a hospital. We don't have an OB. Induction's not an option. So the plan is to wait. And he was just freaking out. His parents were freaking out. My parents were starting to freak out. And that honestly, after the 41 weeks, when everyone was like so jazzed up, that is what made me start feeling anxious, was because everyone was like putting this pressure on me. Like, what are you going to do? How long are you going to wait? How long are you going to give it? And I said, well, I'm under the care of a midwife who delivers babies for a living. If something is wrong, or if I need to make an alternative decision, she will let me know. And, my blood pressure was perfect. I was measuring perfect. In fact, he measured kind of small. I was kind of measuring like a week behind. So it wasn't like, size wasn't a concern. Blood pressure wasn't a concern. So we were just waiting. So then I had told her as we were approaching 10 days post due date, I said, I think I want you to strip my membranes and I think I'll take the castor oil concoction. So she came that morning at like 6 a.m. and I took the cocktail and she swiped my membranes. Well, I threw up the cocktail about an hour after I had taken it. In its entirety. But then I took castor oil by itself again at like 12 o'clock that same day after she'd swiped me. And she had said, Louisa, he is so low. I can't even imagine that me swiping you will not put you in labor. And I'll probably be back here before dinner time tonight. Well, when I tell you, not a thing happened. Nothing. Not a contraction. Not even the bowel movement from the castor oil. Nothing. Nothing. That's when I started like losing it because I was like, what? I'm going to be pregnant forever. And Eli was saying things like, yeah, maybe he'll be born on my next birthday. I'm like, no, not a chance. That will not happen. So, even my kids, I think, had gotten to the point where they're like, well, maybe we're going to have a baby. Maybe we're not. I'm never going into labor. So anyways, that 24 hours, I would say I was petitioning with the Lord, like just being like, okay, like I am not in control. I cannot make this baby come if he is not ready. And if you have a different plan, I'm going to trust you and just wait this thing out. So we waited another day, a night, and then another day. And then at the 12 days, I woke up at 2 a.m. that morning on going into the 12th day. And I woke up, not a contraction. I was just wide awake. And I prayed and just talked to the Lord for about an hour. And I just basically told him, and I felt like I had like some really sweet time with him and sweet time with my family leading up to that. I didn't feel like I was really holding on to anything, but I do feel like I had this like sweet moment with him where I was able to say, I trust you. You're going to make this baby come when he's ready. And I'm just going to not try to make this happen. I mean, I'm a planner. And that's been some of the hardest parts for me about pregnancy and labor and delivery is just like the not knowing when it's going to happen. Um, and lo and behold, at 3 o'clock, I had my first contraction, and I was like, "Oh, it's not real. It's not real. This can't be it." And so I just tried to kind of go back to sleep, and I had contractions about every 10 minutes for until the morning, until about 6:30 in the morning. So 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 12 minutes. I was sleeping kind of in between them too, on and off. So at 6:30, I finally got up, and then I woke Zach up and told him, I said, this was going into Monday. And so he was going back to work. And I said, I would really like for you to stay home from work today. So he said, okay, well, I'll call in and I will stay home. I was like, because I just know if you get up and go to work, it's going to stop. These contractions are going to stop because I'm going to be on with these children and it's not going to go anywhere. So he called in, didn't go to work. He kind of took care of the kids all morning and I just stayed in the bedroom. My contractions were kind of inconsistent, but still coming like every 8 minutes or so. And then we went to the Greenway, took a mile walk, and I was having to kind of stop in between, during the height of contractions. We came home, we ate lunch. And then I had been texting with Courtney on and off, all morning. And she had said, well, why don't you either take a bath or lay down? And I said, well, I was thinking I would lay down. She said, okay, we'll do that. So I kind of laid down in the mile circuit position, with my leg up. And I felt him literally about 20 minutes into that nap roll into position. And the next contraction was about a 25% increased intensity at that point. And then they were coming like every 5 minutes at a 25% increase intensity. And so I got on the ball and did some of that. And then Courtney kept trying to be like, okay, when do you want me to come? And I was like, no, because what if it stops? I was like, I don't want you to come because if it stops, I'm going to be really mad. So just don't come till I know that this is real. So I said, I spent maybe an hour on the ball. And I said, I think I'm going to get in the bathtub. And she's like, okay. So I got in the bathtub and they stayed steady, but they didn't pick up. They weren't increasing in intensity. They weren't decreasing in time. And so she told me, she was like, well, I think I'm going to pack up and I'll text you when I'm leaving. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So about that time I got out of the tub, it was annoying me. And I went to use the bathroom and I had bright bloody show. So I was like, this is it. I know this is it. So I just sat on the toilet for a little while. And then I realized that I was starting to have those kind of adrenaline shakes in between contractions. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. So I transitioned to the ball at my sink and Courtney got there and it was at 4:40 when she got there. And she was like doing her little chart and asking me all the things. And then I stood up for a contraction and my water just busted all over the bathroom floor. And the pressure was so intense, I had to grab onto the faucet so I did not hit my knees. Literally, it felt like a knife driving down between my legs. And so I grabbed the faucet so I didn't hit my knees. And I was like kind of yelling out. And she was like, Louisa, that was your water. Your water just broke. That's wonderful. So, we're going to get Zach and we're going to get him in here. We're going to get in position. And I thought to myself, just based on my other experiences, if I have to be in labor a lot longer with this much pressure, I will never make it. Like, I'll never make it. So I'm holding onto the faucet and she's like, okay, I think we're going to get on your knees. And then she's like, let's turn around and get in a powerful position. And before she came in to like help me turn around, she was like, okay, the other thing I want to prepare you for is you pushed for a long time with your other two babies. So I want you to be mentally prepared that this may not happen this way this time. Everything about this has been different. So let's be prepared for that to maybe be different too. And I like kind of mocked her and I was like, well, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? And she didn't even respond, but I like kind of looked up and kind of scoffed at her. And she was like, I'm just saying, I just want you to be prepared. So, okay, well, whatever. I just kind of like blew her off again. So I was in this position and the funny thing was I was in labor at night with the other two. And with Aaron, I was in labor during the day. So that was so bizarre to me. I literally kept thinking to myself, I'm going to have this baby in broad daylight. I'm not even going to be in labor during the night. Because I kept thinking, oh, well, I'll start pushing in a little while and then maybe it'll go into the night, right? Because I was like, having this like dialogue in my head about that, like, you can't have a baby during the day, like all these weird things. So I am like facing the tub, and Courtney kept saying to Zach, now, Zach, you're going to need to get in position. Babies are slippery when they come out. If you want to catch this baby, you're going to have to get in position. And he had caught both Josie and Eli. And that was another fortunate thing about the birth center, was that, you know, he was able to have that experience. And with Josie, we weren't sure if he was, because she was going to be in the hospital, but our midwife still let him. So that was so sweet. So of course he was fully prepared and wanted to catch Aaron too. So he was on the phone, like out in the hallway, because him too, thinking, well, she pushes forever, you know, it's going to be a while. Well, she's like, Zach, I need you to get in here. Come get in position, please. So he's like kind of coming around the corner. And it was so strange because in my mind, I was like just kind of like in the zone in my contractions with like all of this pressure. I was thinking, I'm the only person in this bathroom. Other than it's just me and Courtney. Somehow in that period of time that I was like in that space, the assistant came in, my mom came in, and Amelia came into the bathroom. And I literally did not even know they were there. Like, you know, my eyes were closed and I was like just in it. Like, and she was like, okay, now she kept saying, now I want you to give me just a couple more pushes. And the whole time I was kind of thinking, am I pushing? Like, is that what's happening right now? I mean, I guess I am, but it just felt so different from every other time. And also I was like leaning over my bathtub. So I was like kind of like holding on to the side of my bathtub, and I was like on, you know, in a squat position, and she made me like raise my leg. So I was like kind of propped up with my leg propped up, and I was on my other knee. And she said, okay, I want you to give me a couple more pushes. And then I heard my mom saying, there he is. He's coming. He's coming. And I was like, oh, people are here. And so I was like, this is getting ready to happen right now. Like, and I was like looking out, kind of like out my window, and it was like broad daylight. So from the time that Courtney got there to the time that Aaron was born, she came in at 4:41 and he was born at 5:42. So she was there for an hour. And yeah, he just came out beautifully, and he had zero vernix and zero blood on him. He was literally completely clean, and he was a little 7 pounds, 5 ounces, 12 days late. And there he was, and he had bright red hair, a whole head full of hair. And my other two were completely bald until they were 2. So that was also just like such a funny gift. My mom kept saying, he has more hair than your other 2 combined, more hair than your other 2 combined. You know, and then Zach just handed him to me, and there we were on my bathroom floor. And Courtney said, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? So we sat there for a minute, and I literally could not believe it. I pushed for 12 minutes. It was 20 minutes from the time my water broke to the time he was born. So it was completely nuts. I was like in complete shock, total shock. So I told her thought I wanted to go to the bed. So they kind of helped me transition to the bed. And then my kids came in, and then you got there. And then, you know, my placenta was delivered about 40 minutes later. My kids were in the room when my placenta came out, and when we cut the cord. And so they were all fascinated and asking a million questions about that. And it was just so sweet because everyone was there. My mom was there. My sister was there. My other sister literally missed the birth by like 30 seconds. Like she comes in the video, like not even 30 seconds after he was born. But, you know, they were there with me in those kind of like postpartum hours. And my mother-in-law and mom put my children to bed that night. And then Zach and I just got in bed and went to sleep with this sweet little newborn. And he has just been such a sweet gift. And the whole experience obviously was just like so incredibly redemptive. And, you know, if I had rated Eli's birth a 10 out of 10, I would rate Aaron's a 12. Like, it was unbelievable and like such a gift. I just felt so blessed and fortunate. And, you know, there is nothing like it. And also because Courtney, you know, provides all your like postnatal care and all that stuff, postpartum care, I didn't have to go anywhere again, like with Eli. And so my milk came in like about 30 hours post delivery. And, my kids were just completely obsessed with him and so in love with him. And everybody was able to come and see him. And that was, the part that I missed so much with Josie too. So I was just so thankful to be able to kind of like relive that and have that with him. So yeah, it was just magical, honestly.
Well, I know you don't plan on having any more children. You have made that very, very clear. However, if you ever did, if the Lord ever supernaturally gave you one, I'm assuming you would choose home birth again?
Oh, undoubtedly. Yes, I would never do it any other way unless for some reason there was a reason I could not, I it just hands down was like the least stressful, all of my what am I trying to say? Prenatal whatever. My leading up to labor and delivery, all of those visits, Courtney, just like came and spent time with me and talked to my children. And that was just so sweet. And I told her when she came for like my 6-week follow-up, I was like, I feel like we're breaking up. Like, you've been coming to my house all this time and spending all this time with me, and now we're not going to see each other anymore. So, I was like, I feel like this is the end of some sort of relationship, which it is in a way, but yeah, that's just so unique, and we've just gotten so far removed from that in our culture with like, the care of our mothers. It's become so, just pathologized, and you cycle through doctors. You don't get to pick who's going to deliver your baby, and it's just crazy to me that I felt more cared for choosing the route of home birth than I ever did in my time, even at the birth center when I had a natural experience.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I agree completely, having done hospital birth center and home birth as well. But I really appreciate you coming on here today and sharing all of your stories with us. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish?
I would just say, if you're on the fence about home birth, natural birth, any of those things, that you can do it. It's what your body's designed to do. As long as you're healthy and you do the preparation and pray, you can do it. Your body's designed to do it. And it is absolutely an attainable goal in most scenarios, I would say. And it has just been one of the most like supernatural spiritual experiences in my life. It has led me to just a deepening in my relationship with the Lord, and also just in my ability as a woman, feeling empowered.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting subscribe. Also, we'd love for you to leave a review of the show so that more people like you can hear more stories like these. If you're local to the Triad of North Carolina and seeking childbirth classes, birth consultations, or a birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to our website for more information. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. Also, if you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to get in touch with me. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.